Hi, everybody, and thank you for tuning in for another one of our webcasts with the amazing Bianca. I met Bianca a few months ago at an event. We were chatting while some other people were getting on with some business. And when I chatted to her, what she said really resonated with me. And I thought, oh my God, I've got to get her on. So here she is. So I'm super, super excited to welcome Bianca and to dig into the amazing topic of emotional intelligence. So, Bianca, thank you so much for joining us.
No, not at all. Thank you to you and to FitPro for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
And a bit of a backstory to this is often before, well, no, before all of the webcasts, I speak to the presenters, speakers, authors, experts to really make sure we're going to pull the best out of it. And my goodness, that chat was amazing. Again, really, really resonated from a personal point of view. And what I want to impress upon you is that we are going to dig in so that you feel that you have a really good understanding of how emotional intelligence can help you and potentially your business and your clients. So I would love to find out, well, I know the backstory, but I'd love to tell you a little bit more about Bianca. She is an expert in this area, having studied psychology. She is renowned for giving amazing educations to millions of people on well-being. She'll tell you a little bit more about her story and we'll weave that through. Bianca, should we go for the first question?
Yeah, hit me. Let's go.
It's a really simple one, but I think you're going to give us an
Good.
amazing answer. What is emotional intelligence in a nutshell, please?
It's a really good question. And I think particularly because it's a term we're hearing so much at the moment, but actually so many of us are like, well, what actually is it? Like, what does it actually mean? And usually when they ask me and I say, well, what do you think it is? Usually they are always correct in parts, like they'll get a few elements of it. And so it's just tying that together. So at a very basic level, emotional intelligence refers to an individual's ability to identify, understand, and manage their emotions, and also manage the emotions of those around them. That's
In a nutshell.
it.
Love it. I love
Yeah.
it.
And it's got 5 main parts. So we've
Yeah.
got self-awareness, self-regulation, empathy, motivation, and social skills.
Yeah. And do you find that sometimes people will, when you put that question back to them, do you find they talk about the things that they perhaps know that they're really good at, or the things that they feel that they would like to work on? For example, if somebody knows they empathize really well, maybe they go, it's like, feeling the experience with another person. What do you find when people talk about it?
I feel like people actually tend to get not necessarily what they're better at or what they're not so good at. It's
Mm.
more they tend to always understand that it's to do with emotions. And that it's to do with sort of managing their emotions or being aware of the emotions. But then they don't tend to always realize that actually it also involves like the empathy, the social skills, the motivation, communication, how we can resolve conflict and that side of it as well. And that's where people don't realize it actually all comes together into one.
Got it, got it. And you've talked about those 5 elements, which is fantastic. So I wanted to ask you how we can use this for ourselves and our clients as kind of a superpower.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what's really important is to realize, we're at this really interesting time at the moment in society and in the world in which historically in our careers and in the workplace, people have always been promoted on job-based skills. And so if you're good at the job, you get the promotion. And what that has resulted in is that a lot of people in a lot of very senior positions and positions of management who are exceptional at the job, but not necessarily exceptional with people. And so now we're starting to see this huge shift of actually what makes a good manager, what makes a good leader. And yes, of course, we have to be good at the job-based skill, but that's actually very easy to learn. And actually, do people want to be managing people? And I think for the companies, it's like often that the only way to progress and to get more money has been through being promoted. And through being promoted, you then get more responsibility of more people. And so what that's resulted in then is people actually who do want to be promoted, who do want more money, but they don't want to manage other people. They don't even like managing other people. And so now when we're looking at emotional intelligence and can it be a superpower? Well, yes, absolutely. Because actually, if we are in touch and if we are being intentional and working on our emotional intelligence, then through that, it allows us to have, first and foremost, a better relationship with ourselves, because we understand our own emotions and we understand how to be with those emotions and manage those emotions, so we can then base our behaviors from them. It helps bolster and improve our relationships with others, because we can show that we can look at things from different perspectives. We can try and communicate in different ways so those people can connect with us. We can empathize. And then it also can lead into, like, it improves our own motivation, so we can help others improve their motivation. So superpower is a strong word, but yeah, why not? Let's go for it.
Love that. And so you're renowned for being a sort of expert in well-being. You also work in resilience. So what do you think? Do you think emotional intelligence is an integral part of well-being?
Yeah, absolutely. I personally believe that we nowadays overcomplicate health so much. And so, whatever I'm talking about, whether it's emotional intelligence, whether it's stress, whether it's burnout, whether it's high performance, whether it's resilience, whatever falls under my umbrella, I always try and make it as simple as possible. Like, how do we simplify this and how do we implement it in a way that works for us and puts us in the best position to be the best versions of ourselves we can be? And so, there's so many factors that come into play with all of these things. But for me, emotional intelligence is almost like that foundational layer. If we can't understand and manage our emotions, then how can we do any of the other things effectively? Because are we ever going to be operating from a place where we want to operate from?
Great question. That's absolutely fundamental, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you and I both know that we've done quite a lot of inner work. You've gone through your things. I've certainly gone through my things, and we'll dig in a little bit to that for your sort of life experience and stuff. But do you think that some people already have a good sort of skill set of emotional intelligence, or do some people have to work very hard at it? Is it something, I think one of the things I want to understand is I felt I always had quite good emotional intelligence, certainly through the inner work I've done. It's improved, and life experience has helped me. I feel that, some people perhaps just have a sort of almost an inherent sort of skill set. Maybe that's role modeling from parents, life experience. So what are your thoughts on that? Maybe you could give us a little insight into your own personal experience. Obviously, you studied psychology and you've had your own experience through things, and whether or not you feel that that experience has made it easier for you to work on emotional intelligence. Does it mean that you've had to look at it? Or I'm just kind of curious, because I always feel that I've been very fortunate to have had to have done the work, if that makes sense, because I find myself at a really good place now. So I'm curious from your point of view.
Yes, I guess I can break that into two parts, and like my own story and my own experience of emotional intelligence, and where maybe I've been better, where maybe I've been not so good, and then actually how does emotional intelligence work? Is it nature? Is it nurture? So for me personally, I wasn't even aware of the term emotional intelligence till like 5 years ago, maybe. I'm not sure. But I've always been aware of the components of it. It's just I never knew it coined in this term. And so for me, I've always been like a highly motivated individual. I've always had great social skills. I am so empathetic. And I think that's a blessing and a curse. And when we're people who do feel deeply, it's such a beautiful thing, because it allows us to connect and be so open to the world. But my gosh, is it hard work sometimes. And so these areas, I've always felt, yeah, okay, I've got a lot of that. The self-awareness and the self-regulation, I think over the course of my life, and not even so much at university. Yes, I learned like the science behind it all then, but when my dad was terminally ill and when I was working in the city in this really high pressure job and doing something that I found incredibly difficult in an incredible difficult time, and went through my own health challenges. I think I actually had very little self-awareness and self-regulation, and I think there's a lot of suppression going on, and it was very much my emotions were controlling me. I was not controlling my emotions. And so although I think I was a relatively high EI individual, there was definitely areas I then came to realize as I've gone through my life and the challenges I faced, and also the development that I've done on myself. Actually, this is areas I really need to work on. And I think from like the perspective of, do we have high EI? Do we have low EI? Yeah, absolutely. You have individuals who naturally have and demonstrate a higher level of EI, and individuals that very much do not. And we all know them when we see them. And so what's really wonderful about EI is it's like any other learned behavior. It's like resilience. It's like going to the gym. It's like eating better. It's like sleeping better. It is something you learn. And so in psychology, we call this term neuroplasticity. And it's the brain's ability to learn new skills, and as it learns new skills, it builds new connections. And so I think that's what's really encouraging about this, is even if you are listening to this, or you want to get to the end of this, you're like, oh no, like I feel like I'm really low in these areas. That's not something to be disheartened about, because actually that's the first step, is being aware, and then actually being inspired that this is very much something you can build upon. And it's like anything in psychology, nature, nurture. Yes, there's an element of genetic disposition. I think it was in 2012, there was a big study done with the link between empathy and genes, and actually finding that a lot of empathy and empathetic behaviors are related to certain genes. But actually, it is nature. It's what's going on in your life. It's the challenges you face. It's the people you're around. All of these things contribute massively.
Yes.
So
yeah, I hear you. I hear you. And it's, the idea that it's, it doesn't have to be static, that it's not you are either are or you're not. So how do you think, so, I'm applaud anybody that listens into things like this where there's a level of curiosity. I don't think that we should all be tuning into things like this and go, yeah, got it. I think it comes in this place of curiosity and being inquisitive, and it's not just to service ourselves, but to sort of look, at the connection and relationships with one another's, which is fundamental, isn't it, to a fitness professional? If they're looking after others, you need to look after yourselves, but you have to have so many of those skills: motivation, empathy. They're such fundamental sort of skills that I don't think you can do the job well without those. Other things are really, really important. So, applaud anyone that's listening and being curious and stuff like that. So if somebody's, like you said, by the end of this, if they're thinking, oh, they've got low EI, or perhaps there's areas of, I'm going to use the term lack, that's a horrible term, sorry, Teresa, but maybe there's an area that they'd like to develop on. Let's reframe it. So if that's going on for somebody and they've got that curiosity, how do you go about, like working on those things? For me, empathy has always been part of me, and like I said, that's almost can be like a superpower, and also something that can, you have to be mindful of, learn the skill of boundaries, for example, and not getting yourself tied up in things, so yeah, how do you think, if somebody's aware that they'd like to work on it a bit more, and there's this neuroplasticity, where do they start?
I think the first step would be to understand what element it is you need to work on.
Yeah.
Is it the managing and regulating emotions?
Yeah.
Is it the way you communicate with other people, and your active listening, your empathetic responses, your constructive feedback, your conflict resolution? Is it your own self-belief and self-compassion and self-confidence? And that obviously then has a huge link into your motivation. So it's about being really honest with yourself. And it's funny what you just said. It reminded me when I was a PT, and I've got over 10,000 one-to-one coaching hours. So you learn a thing or two in that time about coaching and individuals. And I very quickly learned I never wanted to say, start with your weak side, which in PT language means usually like start on your left hand side. When you've got more energy, more oxygen in the cells, it would always be start with your less strong side. And
Yes.
just kind of put that positive spin on it. So,
Yeah.
and this is kind of like this, it's like find what you're less good at or less natural at.
Yes.
And I think we need to be really careful. I think human beings, we can be very black and white. We like answers. We like to put things in boxes. We like things that feel safe. So
Yes.
it's like, I'm either good at this or I'm not good at this. I mean, that's fantastic. That's terrible. That black and white thinking that we do naturally, because it gives us this false sense of security, can
Yep.
actually be really damaging to how we think and how we feel and how we behave. And the world doesn't operate in black and white. The world is very gray. And so we want to start operating in this gray area with our thinking as well. So it's just about being curious of where do you sit in this gray area? Where are the areas that you want to work on? And then once you've highlighted, actually, okay, for example, it's my emotional awareness and my emotional regulation, then you can start putting a plan into place. Okay, well, what does your stress management look like? What do your mindfulness routines look like? What do your relationships look like? What does your day-to-day look like? And start then actually putting plans in place to be proactive and intentional about how you improve.
Yeah, I got it. Do you find, I mean, certainly working in the field that you do you find that people come to this place when there's perhaps a big life event or burnout, or, do you find something has had to, yeah, almost be like a catalyst for change, where it's almost like it creates an openness because they almost like, I don't know what else to do. Do you think it often comes from that place, or do you think that, someone might see someone else, connecting well with somebody else and wanting to have something more? What's your experience of that?
With emotional intelligence in
Mm.
particular, I find it's often a lot of the high achievers that are drawn to this subject, and a lot of the A-type personalities that are drawn to this. And they really want to understand exactly like, why are they thinking this way? Why are they feeling this way? Like, why are the people around them communicating like this? Like, and how do they like overcome it to like get on their path to wherever they want to be?
Yeah.
And I do a lot of corporate workshops and for global companies. And so then the people in the room, they have no choice. They have to be there. It's a mandatory, you are going to go and listen to this workshop. And it's really interesting then because they have to be there. But actually the people who like really get the most from it and leave it and they're like, wow, I didn't know how much I needed that, tend to be the ones who are like really stressed and who are feeling overwhelmed, feeling unable to cope, and actually like, oh, okay, this starts to make a lot more sense to me now.
Yes.
And it's important to also realize that, feeling any of those things, you're not in the minority. You're in the far majority, if anything. That 1 in 6 now in the UK are impacted by mental health. 75% of UK adults are overwhelmed, unable to cope. 21% of employees at work are now engaged. Like, these are huge issues we are seeing. And so if you're feeling these challenging things, that actually, unfortunately, right now, that's normal. But it's how
Yes.
do we overcome them?
Absolutely. So it was 2023, you got Speaker of the Year from American Express. That's right? Did I say that correctly?
Yes.
I did. And it was around this area, right?
Emotional intelligence for leadership. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm guessing that you were talking to leaders.
Yeah, it was actually to their UK sales team. So
Right.
it would have been leaders, but also people who want to be leaders potentially at some point. And just with I do many, many EI workshops, and 90% of the information for all of them is the same. There'll just be a 10% little twist of difference dependent on the audience, but actually
Yeah.
the basis of it is all the same, no matter who you're speaking to and what
Right. Whether
they're
it's
after.
leadership or
Yeah.
whether it's connection or whatever. I get it. And so from the point of view of, let's say, people listening in have got really high levels of EI, and
Mm.
they're recognizing they're working with clients or groups that perhaps are not at that level, how can you connect with somebody who's perhaps not, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, no one's at exactly the same level of anything, right? But I'm just kind of curious, like, how do you, if you're naturally good at empathizing and some people are perhaps a little bit resistant or don't want to get into the
Mm.
depths of things, how do you start? Do you start slow? Do you, I mean,
Yeah.
be
I
great
think
to hear your thoughts.
you always have to meet people where they're at,
Yes.
not where you're at. So many of us make the mistake of trying to meet people where we are at, and all you then do is push that person away because they're not ready for that. They don't know how to communicate like that. They don't want to communicate like that. And that's actually then when a lot of issues and challenges happen, whether that's in work, whether that's in romantic relationships, whether that's in friendships. Like, you have to understand, where is this person at? So if this person has low emotional intelligence, maybe they're demonstrating toxic behaviors, maybe they're not very effective at resolving conflicts, maybe they're just very shut off, then actually you have to figure out the outcome you want, and then how are you going to get there. So I always say there's a huge difference between a reaction and a response. A
Mhm.
reaction is that initial reflex. It's not something we don't control. It's that primary knee-jerk reaction to something, and that's okay, we all do that. But then the emotional intelligence comes in, where we take a step back. We don't react in that way. We create space and we respond in a way that we want to get the output we need. So I think the first thing is, when you're interacting with others and you know that they may not necessarily be at where you're at, there might be a chance of conflict, there might be a
Mhm.
chance of them shutting down. It's almost, you have to create that space to respond first and foremost, so that you know you're not going to end up reacting in a way you don't want to.
Mhm.
Once you've then created that space, it's like, okay, this is what this person's like. This is the outcome I need to achieve here with them. How do I get them there? How do I get this person to connect with me? And it can be really simple things, like actually active listening. Something so simple, but so many people get wrong. So many people nowadays listen to speak instead of listening to hear. So are
Mhm.
you actually listening to what that person is telling you? Are you letting them finish their sentences? Is your device away so that this person knows that they have your full attention? Are you avoiding interrupting them? Are you paraphrasing what they're saying so that they actually then hear you say back to them? They're like, oh, this person's actually listening to me, you know? And just little cues like that. And then also then, okay, you're listening to them. Are you showing empathetic responses? I think, again, a lot of the time people so quick to try and find a solution. Some people don't want solutions. They just want to be heard.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I'm really sorry to hear that. That must have been challenging. Or reflecting on shared experiences, avoiding judgment, having a safe space, asking open-ended questions, using non-verbal cues. These little things that go such a long way, but are so quick to be forgot about, especially in today's modern world where everyone's in such a rush and there is so many distractions. It's like, if you want to connect with this person, you have to create the time and the environment to do so.
Yeah, it's and those little things are incredibly
Huge.
powerful,
Yeah.
unlocking something, which can be, like that little domino, that first bit, and then and I, building rapport, for example, with clients. It doesn't happen by you pushing all the dominoes over in one set, it is just these little things,
Yeah.
and a sort of a generosity in time and willingness is such an ingredient, I think, to success. And I've learned um, over the years, certainly by giving space to things, is a phenomenal thing. Like, for yourself, just to go, it's just, now it's such a practice thing of mine
Mm.
that now it's a really lovely thing. It's not like I have to deliberately think, oh, I need to do this. It just, and then I can look over it and without over analyzing it. It's so exciting, to be able to do that. And being able to offer someone else that, and coming back to something is a wonderful, wonderful skill.
Yeah.
So, seeing as we're talking about well-being, we're talking about emotional intelligence, we've sort of touched on resilience and stuff like that. Can I ask, what made you so incredibly passionate and about this area? I'd love to know.
Yeah, I've I've always been fascinated by the human brain and human behavior. I was bullied as a really young child, and I think that probably was the catalyst for being fascinated. Why people behave strangely, for want of a better phrase, um, as we're keeping it polite. Um, and so that sort of, I guess, I was always fascinated with it. Going to university, I've always also been fascinated. It always sounds strange when I say it, by volcanoes. I love, yes, yes,
Yes. Yes.
obsessed with tectonic plates, as you do.
Yes.
So it was a toss up between geography and psychology. And I always think the world works in really mysterious ways, and reflecting on it, like how significant that life choice was at the time, and I didn't even think twice about it, and now doing what I do and having that background. So that's why I always had this like sense of whatever's going on, it's okay, because the world, it will work in its way. And if we can just sort of lean into that and accept it, even if it's hard, then life becomes easier. And so went to study that, fell in love with it, graduated. The goal was then to go down the clinical psychology route and do my master's, become a practitioner. And about after 3 weeks from graduating, I found out my dad had 3 months left to live. And so this was like a really challenging time. He was a really, really, really healthy man. He was my best friend in the world. And it was just a huge shock to him, to us, to everyone. And so the next 3 months is very much one foot in front of the other, and just meandering that sort of time. After 3 months, he was still alive. He told me I had to go get a job. I thought that was really unfair. And really, I didn't want to go and add to my qualifications. I wasn't in a cognitive state to be using my brain. And so I just had this huge motivation that I wanted to make as much money as possible, as quickly as possible, so I could either buy his health or buy him a Ferrari. And that was it. That was the goal. Week later, I ended up on a sales floor for a tech firm. And yeah, it was crazy. It was a real introduction to the corporate world. I think there was 800 people in that sales floor. I was one of very, very few women. I was one of two women on my team. I was one of one woman on my team very shortly after starting. As youngest person, was second youngest person in the company. And just threw my everything into that job, ended up in one of the top performing sales teams globally within my first year, working ridiculous hours, completely neglecting my own personal well-being needs. My dad was dying, and there was just so much going on there. And so when he passed away, I actually ended up in hospital, and the doctors said that I'd gone through such an extreme burnout that my cortisol was so high, I basically no longer had a stomach wall left, and that I'd need endoscopies every 6 months for the rest of my life. I needed to be on medication for the rest of my life. And there was just this moment where I'd watched my dad's health just be ripped from him, totally out of our control. And I just felt like I was willingly throwing my health away.
Mhm.
And it just didn't sit with me. I was just like, what am I doing? So I quit the job, still one of my best days of my life. And I took a year out, and at that time was just focusing on my own personal development, just not even thinking about personal development. And I do in the sense now of like, how do I improve and how do I get better? And this like whole journey to enlightenment, which I'm pretty sure is a load of rubbish anyway. I don't think we ever get there. The further you go down it, the more complicated it gets. But still do it. Don't be let that deter you. It does get better. But yeah, so for at that time, it was just really to like, how do I get my physical health back, and how do I get through this grief? Did that slowly, came back to the UK, added to my qualifications. At the time, just wanted to help one person either have the support that I didn't have when I was going through what I was going through, or yeah, just try to like make one person's life easier, I guess. And then that, led to 10,000 one-to-one coaching hours. In the pandemic, I saw this opportunity to work more at a scale. I've always wanted to work in the corporate space and try and make an impact there. So I started delivering talks. That led to design and wellbeing strategies. Was, delivering talks to thousands of people online. I think within about 3 months of setting that company up, I was speaking to CDW, Cisco, American Express, Snapchat, the University of Cambridge, all these companies coming to me because they wanted to hear me, which still blows my mind. And then that led to the idea of Human OS. And so it's always just been this organic journey, I guess, of just how do I impact more, and how do we create more, and how do we give people the support they need and deserve.
And this is a health optimization package, right? So, or platform, I should say. So can you talk about Human OS for us?
Yeah, so Human OS was an idea that came around from a combination of my time in the city, the coaching hours, and also working with corporate organizations. And it very quickly became apparent that we can give the individual all the tools and all the resources they need to improve their own personal health. But if they keep going into environments that are detrimental and unsustainable, we as a society are not going to get very far. It's just putting like a plaster over the situation. And then I started reading more and more of the research and the data, and seeing things, last year we saw the highest levels of stress we've ever seen, a 13% increase from the year before. It's 72% of people in the UK now are showing at least one symptom of burnout. The average age of burnout is 32 years old. In the workplace last year, there's a 44% increase in suicidal thoughts. Like, we are experiencing huge challenges right now. And so what I wanted to do was to create a platform that not only gives the individual the support and the experts they need, but gives the business the data and the strategy services they need to actually start creating long-term sustainable health and well-being strategies. And that's sort of what keeps me busy and out of trouble now.
I love that. But I really love that when I met you, you told me, so much of what you're sharing with the FitPro community. It resonated with me greatly, and I'm really grateful that you'd share it with the community. So, because I think, I think it's really important that people get to know where it's come from, how genuinely important this is to you, to be, you said if you could just come out and help one person, I mean, clearly you've helped a phenomenal amount of people. And, it's a really important thing, there's people doing this work, and yet we're still seeing the statistics that you're quoting, and it's terrifying and shocking. So if you had a magic wand, you have a magic wand, because if you do, if you had a magic wand and you could, sprinkle a bit of magic over some places, or give a gift of something, I don't know, maybe in the corporate world, or to the FitPro, or even to clients, and it's to do with your well-being kind of thing, what is the one gift or wish you'd give them? I know it's a crazy question. It just came to me. I just thought, oh, let's have a magic wand.
It's such a good question. And I think what really upsets me in this society we're in currently is I feel like people have forgot how to be human. And I feel like, we live in the most connected world we've ever lived in, and yet loneliness is so rife. And I think it would be to be able to give people that time and that energy, because actually time's redundant if we don't have the energy to use it, but that energy to actually go and do the things they need to do and prioritize for their well-being, and whatever that most important thing to them is, whether that's extra time with their family, whether that's actually getting out for a morning walk, whether that's probably lots of people with a few £1,000s in their bank account so they don't have to worry about their mortgage or their rent or feeding their kids. I think it's crazy the challenges we're seeing right now that for me, they just should not exist.
Yeah, I really love that you took your time to think that through. But you know, you're not defined by that one answer. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm just always sometimes, not sometimes, always, that's not impossible. But you know, I'm often curious, like if I ask an odd question, like what is the first thing that pops up? Because normally that's the most sort of symbolic or one that you're thinking about right now and what
Yeah.
sort of resonates with you.
Well, good thing I said that.
Exactly, yeah. You know, and the reason that's so significant is I think being a fit pro is a very lonely job.
Yeah.
Anyway, and when you know you're remarking on you know, that we're the most connected that we've ever been, but there's this real level of disconnect. And in a lonely job, you
Mm.
know, it's really hard for fit pros. So have you got any advice for fitness professionals on how they could, you know, connect better, not just from an emotional intelligence point of view, but you know, from that sort of being in that lonely place. You've been a PT, right? You know how hard it is often
Yeah.
to I mean, I know you're very motivated, but it's hard to do the work on your own. What have you got any thoughts and advice for fit pros on this?
I think especially within the fitness industry, like I'm pretty anti social media anyway. I really do think it's the devil. And like I always joke with my close friends, I can't wait for the day my business is big enough where I never have to look at social media ever again. And I'm just gonna have some weird little fake name with like 2 followers, and post photos of my pasta every now and then, and that is it.
Yes. And your
Like,
plants.
yeah, exactly. And so I think, especially in the fitness industry, I think there is so much self comparison that goes on, and there is so much noise out there. And it's so quick to go online and think you're failing or you're not enough or other people are doing it better or have more of whatever this fake reality that's being perceived on there is. And I just always think, and I always say this in my talks, and I used to always say this to my clients, like, how much better use could that time be put to? The, you know, that 20 minutes you're spending on that device, doom scrolling, and we all do it. It's not coming from a place of judgment. And
No.
especially when you're a fit pro, that you do have to be putting things out there because that's how you build your business, you know, and I'm still in that stage. I totally get that. But be really clever about it. Be mindful. Go on, post what you need to post for your business, for your brand, and get off. And start giving yourself some time back. And I also think, and this is something that I do myself still now, is we get so exhausted because a lot of the time we're working long hours, antisocial hours. You know, when I was PT and I'd be in the gym at 5:30 a.m. and leaving at 10:30 p.m. You know, you are doing these, especially at the start when you're trying to build up your books and you're working to other people's diaries. You get to a point where they work around yours, but to begin with, you're on their time zones. And even now, like running my own business, you know, like I get up at 5 a.m. every day, have an hour to myself. I start work. Sometimes I work for 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 hours, you know, and I do prioritize my own wellness, but also in work and in business, there is going to be sometimes sacrifice, and that's okay as well, and being gentle with yourself. But
Mhm.
it's making sure you're not sacrificing so much that that's then impacting your own basic psychological needs. And so, you know, if you don't have loads of time or you're tired, then okay, no, maybe you don't want to go out for dinner with your friends, or maybe you don't want to go on that date night, or no, you know, you don't necessarily want to do those things, and that's also okay. But even a 5 minute phone call with someone you love is enough just to get those endorphins going. And that's what I do now with like people I love. They know if I'm calling them, it's 5 minutes only. They know not to ask me about work because it's the last thing I want to talk about. And I'll just call them and go, 5 minutes, summary of your day, go. And it's enough. And then you leave that phone call and you feel great. And actually, you're just getting that connection. It's rather than liking a million people you don't know online, like you're actually calling the people you love and you're putting your time into those relationships. And I think that's so important.
Love that. I love that. Great advice. Bianca, is there anything that we've not covered in our chat that you would like to? I mean, wow, you've given us some amazing stats. You've given us some, you know, some really great ways of, I guess, starting building on that awareness of what emotional intelligence is. You know, you've come from a really lovely, inviting sort of place and not from a place of judgment and preachiness, which sometimes can happen in the space of you should do this, you should do. I don't know why I'm doing that. but you know what I mean. And I think it's a really informative, inspirational conversation that we've had that comes from a real place of lived experience, but also, your stuff. So I'm really personally incredibly grateful for you giving us that. Um, but I just wanted to check if there's anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to.
No, I think it's just like if we bring it back to that emotional intelligence piece to end on, then it's highlighting, like we said earlier, what are the areas you need to work on? So is it the self-reflection? And then if it is the self-reflection, taking time to understand your emotions, your triggers, your patterns, whether it's journaling, whether it's actually giving yourself some time out to have the space to think, whether it's engaging with a coach or a therapist yourself if you need help, because that's hard. It's really
Mm.
hard to understand your emotions and sit with them. So don't be ashamed if you do need to, go for help. Or then if it's the emotional regulation, are you actually making time to slow down? Are you making time to do breath work? Are you taking time to go for a walk after work? Like, what are you doing to physically move that cortisol out of your body? Is it the empathy? And actually, are you taking space, that reaction versus response, and putting yourself in other people's positions and trying not to judge based on, your initial reaction and maybe your perceptual biases, and you're taking a step back going, where's this person coming from? And then the social skills and the active listening and all those things we talked about, like, are you actually being fully present? Are you removing distractions? And then that motivation and that continuous learning. And I think that's a really beautiful one. It's actually investing in yourself enough that you're investing in your learning. It's a continuous journey. Like you say to your clients, all other areas of health, find what works for you, find what you can hold yourself accountable to, find what you enjoy, and then just really try and embrace that process of it and not make it something you're putting yourself under pressure on.
Yeah, absolutely. And is there, this is a place where that, people have started that, and that's great advice. And you've given a real sort of a taster of, sprinkling of the things that they can do. Obviously, tell them where they can contact you. So, please tell them.
Bianca at humanos.co.uk, Bianca Errigo, ERRIGO on LinkedIn, or Bianca Errigo Coaching, I think it is, on Instagram.
Fantastic. And from the point of view of maybe resources or help or support, is there anything that you would suggest for a book or anything where you think, oh, this might be a nice starter for people? Well, not even a starter, just a nice resource.
That's a really good question. What
Thank you very much.
good books have I read on this? I've read so many books, and now
Me too. I'm audible. I tend to listen to, I don't know why I'm doing this, like you don't know what listening is, but I tend to listen to a lot of things. But for me, what has definitely helped is I've done the work with therapists. I've done 10 years of amazing therapy over my lifetime, and that for me is the inner work that I've done. But then I've done, I've what I haven't set out is punishing myself, being I should be better, which is what I heard you saying, like, not putting pressure on yourself, finding motivation, not I should be better at this, but what can help me, what can support me. Have you thought of anything that might sort of help?
I'll have a think so we can put it in the links below. I
Yes.
am doing a 60-minute workshop on this at Wheatley in June, which is the
So
UK's biggest wellness festival. And apparently I get discounted tickets. Again, I haven't looked, but I can put a link there as well, because then it'll be a really interactive, in-depth session looking at all these components in more detail with really actionable strategies about how we start implementing them. So I can share that as well, and I'll have a think on the books.
lovely. And we'll put those under the, what's it called? A video.
Yes.
The link.
Webcast.
Yeah, the webcast. Bianca, thank you. It was a pleasure to meet you, and certainly because one of the outcomes is that we've been able to share your amazing insights and wisdom on this webcast with our amazing FitPro community. Before we sign off, I want to say a massive thank you to the FitPro community for just tuning in again for amazing stuff. It really is worth it, isn't it? Bianca, any last words?
No, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. And if anyone does have any questions, then yeah, they're more than welcome to just send me a message, and I'll try and help where I can and point them in the right direction.
Thank you, Bianca. Right. Should we do a cheesy wave at the end? We're signing off. How long do you think we could do this for? Right. I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you, FitPro community. Thank you, Bianca.
Bye. I'm still